Hello, this is a 2000 Saturn SL2 and it was having excessive oil burning. I was going through something like a quart of oil about every 1,000 miles, and currently I'm going through a quart of oil about every 2,300 miles. So that's a significant improvement. The process I'm about to show you is basically going to help free the piston rings, the low compression piston rings that are on the outside of the cylinder, and clean up that area in order for the piston rings and the oil and everything to move better and lower the excessive oil burning. So what is a piston? Well, imagine that this is a piston and that is the top of the piston, and those rubber bands represent rings. Those rings represent a space that's between the cylinder wall and the piston, and the rings push outward. The top ring is called a combustion ring, and the bottom ring is an oil ring, and the piston moves up and down, okay? And the piston rings push up against that wall. And what they did to make cars more efficient and get better mileage was they created low tension rings. The rings used to push harder up against the cylinder wall, and now they don't push as hard. And the reason why is because they're less tension means less energy to move the piston, less friction, which means better gas mileage. Unfortunately, those low tension rings have a tendency to get gummed up, meaning gummy stuff gets in behind and underneath the top ring and gums up the holes. There's these holes behind those rings. Those are called compression rings. There's holes behind them that are called drain back holes. So the cylinders are hollow. The top is where the explosion takes place of the spark plug. I'll go over that later. But there's drain back holes, and those holes can get plugged up, and gummy stuff and carbon and soot can build up in these ring areas and cause excessive burning because the piston rings aren't able to move properly and the oil's not able to move where it needs to move, and gases from exploded fuel can get past the upper rings down into the oil. Oil can get past these rings up into the fuel area and burn, and the contaminants from the combustion and the fuel can get into your oil and ruin your oil and cause damage, and the oil can get up here and burn. So what we're trying to do is prevent excessive oil burning. First thing you want to do is replace what's called the PCV valve. PCV, positive crankcase ventilation, the positive crankcase ventilation valve. These are usually easy to find, but they can be very difficult. It can take over an hour to get one of these things out, and can be very difficult. But these ones are real simple, and they're only about $7. But the PCV valve can be allowing oil to get out and burn, so that's something to check. If you're not dripping oil, you don't have any leaks, where's the oil going? It can be seen if you look at some of these cars that used to burn back in the day before all the smog stuff. Cars used to go down the street and they'd have a cloud of blue smoke behind them. What's the blue smoke? Well, it's oil that's burning. Okay, so this is going to be real basic for some people, but I'm going to do the basics to help explain how cars work for people who don't really know this stuff. Air comes in, goes through the air box. There's an air filter in there. Change it every 10,000 miles or so, and it should run fine. Check it, and it should be fine. Air goes through here, goes into, in this car, a throttle body. This moves when you press the gas pedal and delivers fuel. The air fuel mixture goes into these things here, are called fuel injectors. They inject fuel through this area here called an intake manifold. The fuel goes to the top of the cylinder, which you can kind of see there. And if you look kind of carefully, you can see it's all black down there, okay? So what happens is these used to be called distributor caps, and now they're just called coil packs usually. But the spark comes to the different wires in sequence, not 1, 2, 3, 4, but it might go 1, 3, 2, 4, 1, 3, 2, 4 to keep the engine balanced in the way that it burns. Sends the spark to the top of the spark plug. The spark plug delivers the spark. The gasoline and air mixture is below the spark plug, between that and the cylinder. And when the cylinder comes up, it moves through the engine and the explosion happens. Let me see if I can do it this way. It moves up, it's called top dead center, and then right around that point, boom, and it shoots it down, and then it comes back up, boom, 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 and when it explodes, it pushes down, and when it pushes down, it causes things to rotate, and those things move the car. What happens to the spent fuel air mixture that's burning? It goes through the exhaust manifold. Hopefully, if the exhaust manifold's not completely plugged up with carbon and soot, that can happen, and then goes out past the oxygen sensors, and that determines how much stuff's burning. Goes through the catalytic converter. By the way, don't use seafoam. Seafoam, I don't use it. I've used it before. It sends a lot of gunk into your catalytic converter, and then you might wreck your catalytic converter. But I would recommend that you change your oil with full synthetic, and I use a good quality engine oil. It says 20,000 or 10,000 on some of these things. That's ridiculous. It doesn't last that long. 5,000, 6,000 max on full synthetic. Save your engine. Your engine oil goes bad, gets contaminated, doesn't work properly. It can get acidic and gets a lot of contaminants in there. It's not working properly. It'll damage your engine. It's cheaper to just change the oil and the oil filter every time. 3,000 miles if you're using regular standard oil. Okay, the exhaust gases come out, and this older car has an EGR, which is exhaust gas recirculation, EGR valve, where it sends some of the exhaust gases through the top area there over to the other side and reburns them by sending the unspent fuel, theoretically, the unspent fuel with the exhaust back through the throttle body. That can get all plugged up. That's a whole nother video. Try to buy OEM parts. Use the OEM recommended spark plugs. You don't have to be excessive about it. All these fancy spark plugs. Just the regular OEM is good enough. The dielectric grease, use that at the top of the spark plug. It helps this boot not stick to the ceramic, and it helps the metal and the metal not stick to each other and have corrosion. So dielectric grease, just a little bit on this area here as you put it in. Anti-seize on the threads, just put a little bit of anti-seize on the threads as you put them back in there, and it should be fine. So again, this is to lower the amount of burnt fuel, burnt oil, excessive oil burning. And I think I've said this already, I can't remember, but the top of the hash marks to the bottom of the hash marks is about a quart, and so I was keeping track of that. The guy with the video will B12 Chemtool lower excessive oil burning. That video is long, and the guy did like 10 videos. He tried all kinds of different products, including stuff that cost hundreds of dollars to do the same thing, and he found that B12 Chemtool was the best. This is extremely flammable, so a few heads up. One, make sure you have a couple days to be able to do this in case your car doesn't start after you do this, or in case it takes a while for you to get the chemical to do what you want it to do. So I'm going to pour about half of one of these bottles ultimately in each one of these cylinders. So half a bottle, half a bottle, half a bottle, half a bottle, 4-cylinder engine. It's going to take a while for that stuff to sit in there at the top of the cylinder and to move around the piston rings, the compression rings, and that's going to clean off not only hopefully the drain back holes on the outside of the piston, so that the oil can flow through that down back into the crankcase, but it'll clean off all the gumminess and all the soot and all the carbon. So at the top of those things you see all that ashy stuff, it's carbon. It's like charcoal. So the air fuel mixture comes through, explodes, sends gases out here. A lot of that soot builds carbon up, and if you look at the insides of these things, sometimes they're like charcoal briquettes. They're just plugged up, and that EGR can get plugged up with exhaust gases, and then that won't work. It's a whole different video. Anyway, you're gonna put some of the chemical, the B12 Chemtool, in there, but you don't want it to go past those threads, and you don't want it to evaporate. So then you're gonna put the spark plug back in there in order to keep it from evaporating. And you're gonna let it sit there, take it off, check. You're just gonna put it in a few threads. Now, one tip is you always go to the left, loosen it up. It'll seat in the threads, and then turn. Make sure you get a couple hand turn revolutions. Otherwise you can strip or cross thread the top of your cylinder. Those threads can get cross threaded. That'll mess up everything. I did that one time on my first car, 1974 Honda Civic, my first car, and I did that. That was a expensive lesson to learn. Cost me about $300 in gosh, what year was that? Maybe 1979. Anyway, you're going to leave that stuff so that it flows through, but one of the ways that you can help this process along is by moving the crank. And if you look down there, you can kind of see the head of a bolt on the crank case that goes through there, that bolt. I think it's called bar, B-A-R, a bar check or something. You can look up videos on that, but getting that thing to move. So it's probably a 22 millimeter. I don't remember what it is exactly, but you can kind of see there's a bolt at the top of that, and you turn it clockwise. And when you turn that bolt clockwise, it'll rotate the crank case, and that'll cause the pistons to move up and down, and it'll cause the rings to move a little bit, and it'll help this process along. So that's going to be challenging, but watch a video on that. That's a whole separate thing. I'm not going to get into it. You can just let the stuff sit. Maybe you use a quarter of a bottle and then come back the next morning and use another quarter of a bottle. I ended up using a whole bottle on each one of the cylinder heads. And like I said, it went from a quart every 1,000 miles to a quart 2,200, 2,500 miles. Obviously, how you drive, the speed you drive, and everything else is going to change the amount of oil that you burn. But you're going to go through a lot of this stuff. You got your dielectric grease, your anti-seize. I'm putting in new spark plugs even though I don't need them right now. Check each spark plug, see if you see anything unusual about any plug, if it's particularly fouled with carbon. Be careful, these things can crack and break, and then it'll short out through the side of the ceramic. Things that you can do to get better fuel economy is obviously change the plug wires, change the plugs. I did use the B12. I used 2 cans of that stuff in the fuel, and that helped clean the fuel system. That stuff's cheap. It's only like $5 a can at Walmart. But this coil, you can replace that. That increases efficiency. Anything that causes problems with electrical is bad. It causes more heat. So that changing that can help with your fuel economy. But when it comes to protecting your engine, there's nothing better than making sure you change your oil frequently and keep your oil clean and use a high quality, I believe, a full synthetic oil, and don't go past 5,000 miles. There's a guy named, his YouTube channel is called The Car Care Nut. He specializes in Toyotas. The Car Care Nut. Story real quick. I think he had a customer who was a dentist, and the guy had a brand new Lexus, and after a couple years the guy had 80,000 miles on his Lexus, and he needed to have the whole engine rebuilt because he took it to the dealer, and the dealer was only changing the oil every 10,000 miles, full synthetic, and it caused such extreme damage to his engine every 10,000 miles that he had to get the engine rebuilt. It was burning like a quart of oil every 700 miles. It destroyed his engine. That's good for the dealer. It's good for Toyota to sell more cars. It's bad for consumers. Another trick that people do is, this says 20, or it's, what is it, 30? 5 weight 30. What they'll do is they'll put in a thicker oil, or they'll put in some kind of heavy duty thickening substance, and that'll cause more friction, and the oil moves slower, and it's not formulated to this particular engine. This is a thinner oil than a full 30 weight, but they'll use a heavier weight oil, which will burn less, but the car's not going to get the fuel economy that it's supposed to. I think that's about it. Couple heads ups is that stuff, the B12 Chemtool, is extremely flammable. Do not pour it into a hot engine. The other thing you can do is disconnect your battery so you don't get a spark. Also, after you're done with this, disconnect the battery and let it sit for about 5 minutes. And it's an engine trick. Scotty Kilmer does it, and a lot of other people do it. But what you do is you disconnect either one of those or both of them for at least 5 minutes, and it resets the computer in the car. And then when you start running the car again, the settings in the car will change according to the new conditions. So that's another little trick that you can use. Especially works good on automatic transmissions, but this is a manual 5-speed. I'm trying to think if there's anything that I've missed before I say enough, and I don't want to do any more videos. You can loosen up this belt when you go to turn that, but you might be able to turn it. Again, that's to move the pistons and allow them to move and to help this chemical move around. You might only be able to put in like a cup of that stuff at a time, put the spark plugs back on, come back the next day, do it again, do it again. I literally had a can in each one by the time I was done, and it was a dramatic improvement. Now, why is this? Because those piston rings are low tension, and they're not pushing up against the cylinder wall. So the piston rings push out a little bit in order to keep the combustion stuff up in the top and the oil stuff down in the bottom. So that top one is the compression ring for the what's it called, the combustion ring. So when the fuel explodes, the stuff doesn't move past it into the oil. And the bottom ring is called the oil ring, to keep the oil down from going up past the ring. And the drain back holes and the channels around the piston, all this stuff is hopefully going to get cleaned. So do not have any liquid at the top of any of those. When you go to start the car, check and make sure there's no liquid in there. That can cause what's called, I believe it's called a hydrolock. Liquid at the top of that, which would burn, explode. It's the wrong amount, and it's also a liquid, and so that can cause severe engine damage. It can destroy your engine. So make sure there's no B12 Chemtool in there. The other thing is, when you go to start the vehicle, you've cleaned off the piston rings, you've cleaned off the cylinder walls, there's no oil. The oil is necessary, or else you can get damaged. So turn the car over, the ignition, like and then stop. Wait a couple minutes, and then do it again, and then stop. Why? To throw oil all around inside the engine and lubricate the walls before you go because it's going to be very difficult to start the car. Now, after you're done with this process, you've thoroughly contaminated the oil, and the oil has to be changed, and the oil filter has to be changed. So you're going to need to have the oil filter. If you want to change the spark plugs, you can. If you don't need to, don't. Dielectric grease, anti-seize. Basically, this is the only tool I need, plus the tool that took off the retainer here and the drain pan socket. So not a real tool heavy job. If you want to turn that, you're going to need a long wrench in order to be able to get to it, and maybe some bar to be able to move it around, but clockwise. Watch other videos. Hopefully this helps you. I probably missed something important, but hopefully it's not too important. And again, the whole point of this is to reduce excessive oil consumption. Here's one of the biggest risks of you burning too much oil. You put in the right amount of oil, you drive the car, you forget to check the oil, or it burns too much, the oil level gets low, the engine seizes, meaning the metal to metal sticks, and you've destroyed your engine, and stuff moves around in there and jams up against a piston that's stuck in place because something seized. S-E-I-Z-E, I think is how you spell that. In other words, it's not moving. So proper lubrication is good. I think that's pretty much everything. I want to wish people the best of luck, but again, there's another video out there where this guy tested all this stuff. I don't remember the name of it exactly, but it's something like, will B12 Chemtool reduce excessive oil burning? And you'll know who the guy is because he's got a it's kind of a gold colored, I think it's a Toyota Corolla, or it might be an older Camry, but it might be a Corolla. I think he's up in Oregon or something, I don't know. Anyway, he has like 10 videos where he used all kinds of different chemicals and spent hundreds of dollars, and he ended up tearing down his engine and rebuilding it. And he conducted all kinds of tests where he ran the vehicle and he measured the oil, and he really spent a lot of time on this. And thanks to him and other people who have gone before us to help us out, but this really was the most effective thing that I could find that helped, and good luck.